Well, it sure seems like ESPN loves Michael Hawkins as quarterback one heading into 2026 for West Virginia. What do you think, though? Do you think that's a fair characterization of what's going to happen, or could it just be complete chaos like it was last year?
You are Locked On West Virginia, your daily podcast on the West Virginia Mountaineers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what is up, guys? Welcome back in. My name is Mountaineer Paul. I am your host here. Welcome back into Locked On West Virginia as we dive into another episode tonight, right before the basketball game. You know, we like to do it like that. That way we can let this thing simmer just a little bit while the game is going on. And thanks for making us your first listen. For being a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we're talking about your team, the Mountaineers, every single day. And glad to be doing so. So thank you guys so much for being here. On today's show, we'll be giving final thoughts on the basketball game right before the game. Before that, though, we need to talk about a couple rooms for the West Virginia football team. We'll be talking about some Bandits. We'll be talking about some defensive line. Did we improve there? I think that's an interesting question. We'll look at what we lost, what we have, and see if it's gotten better. I think it's an interesting room to look at because you could definitely say that maybe there was more top-end talent there last year. You could potentially say that they spent more money there last year, but is it better? I don't know. And then finally, we're going to talk about this situation with ESPN kind of anointing Michael Hawkins Jr. as the day one starter for West Virginia. How do you feel about that? I'm curious how you guys feel about it. It's definitely something that, while I understand is going to happen in a preseason, those kind of things happen, right? But I think we need to pump the brakes on any kind of predictions for this competition. So much still needs to play out, right? ESPN's article kind of reads like this. So it is predicting every starting quarterback in the country, by the way. So, it's whoever did this took on a pretty big undertaking, right? I think for West Virginia's, unless you're really familiar with the situation, it'd be easy to choose Hawkins. So it says this: 2026 starter Michael Hawkins Jr., redshirt sophomore, Oklahoma transfer. West Virginia coach Rich Rodriguez scored a dynamic dual threat portal talent in Hawkins, who arrives from Oklahoma with 3 seasons of remaining eligibility. A former 4-star recruit, Hawkins made 4 starts for the Sooners as a freshman in 2024 and has accounted for 950 passing yards, 262 rushing yards, and 8 total touchdowns across 9 college games, alongside 2025 FBS leading rusher Cam Cook, who transferred in from Jacksonville State. Hawkins has the potential to charge an intriguing run game with the Mountaineers in 2026 if he can beat out incumbent Scotty Fox Jr. for the starting job. This is it says why he'll start up above. The competition is Fox, the incumbent, who started each of West Virginia's 6 games in 2025. 59% of his passes for 1,276 yards and 7 touchdowns and 6 interceptions in his true freshman season. Fifth-year passer Max Brown, the former Florida and Charlotte quarterback, provides needed experience to a young quarterback room in this second season with the program. The Mountaineers also added 3 quarterbacks in the program's latest recruiting class, led by 3-star Jaron Hughley, the number 36 athlete prospect in 2026 ESPN 300. I didn't realize he was rated that high in the ESPN 300. Wow. That's pretty good. That maybe that's probably, he's probably not ESPN 300. I probably misread that. All right. So I think for me on this one, like I said, I wanted to break it down a bit here because nationally it feels like this job is already kind of being handed to Michael Hawkins Jr. But if you actually watch West Virginia the last 6 games of 2025, the story isn't nearly as clean as ESPN makes it sound. I think, obviously ESPN and other national outlets are going to project Hawkins to be the starter all offseason leading into the season. That's just going to be what it is. We may as well get used to that. But West Virginia fans know Scotty Fox finished the year, and I think West Virginia fans know that this is a legit competition. And I think Rich Rodriguez does not anoint starters based on hype. He doesn't anoint starters based on much anything, right? Even as much as they're being paid, I don't think matters to an extent. It might get you more opportunity, but for the most part, I think this is a really even battle coming into it. So it's going to be fun to watch. Obviously, the case for Hawkins Jr. is there's a bunch. Former 4-star recruit, the Oklahoma transfer that still matters, right? I think that still matters that you played at Oklahoma. He played early and he played often out of blue blood. He had multiple starts as a true freshman in 2024. He's obviously got a really great dual threat skill set, 950 passing yards, 262 rushing yards, 8 touchdowns. He's really comfortable extending plays. He's a design quarterback run threat. He pairs well with Rich Rod's concepts. You got Cam Cook in the backfield, which could be total dynamicism. I mean, come on. And the national analysts love a quarterback running back stress, right? That can stress the defense both ways. Obviously, there's the stealing argument too. Hawkins' appeal is what he could become. And I think with 3 years of eligibility remaining, if you can keep him in Morgantown and the game slows down for him, he could be not just dangerous, but otherworldly. And ESPN bets on his upside, I think, over Scotty's system mastery, if you will, because, maybe mastery is not the right word for Scotty. I don't want someone to say he's mastered it yet, but, I think if you're talking about a projection battle between the two, that would be an interesting conversation to have. So if you're looking for Scotty's side of the argument, obviously we've talked about all these things a couple of different times, but not only the fact that he started the final 6 games in 2025 in this offense, live reps versus, the hypothetical upside of Hawkins weighs a little heavier for me. And he already understands protections, progressions, the tempo, what Rich Rodriguez values, and the decision-making over the dazzle, because Rich Rod doesn't really care about the dazzle as much. And there's no learning curve with Scotty Fox, and that matters in a year 1, year 2 rebuild. So also arm talent and passing ability. I think personally at this point in time, I think Fox is the better pure passer. I know that there are people that disagree with that. I think I've had a gentleman come into the comments that may be a relative of Michael Hawkins Jr. I'm not exactly sure, but he always reminds me that Hawkins threw for 55 touchdowns and 3 interceptions his senior year in high school, which is amazing. But just based on my eye, I think that, Scotty is just a little better passer. I think he's got a little tighter ball placement. He's a little better on the anticipation throws. I think he's a little more comfortable operating this offense for sure, and the intermediate and timing routes as well. Hawkins can get there. I have no doubt that he can get there. And he's an athlete, right? So we get that. Fox is a quarterback who can run, though. That's the thing. Like, I think, Scotty is a guy that can really sling it around and can also run a little. And as where Hawkins is maybe the reverse of that, but we'll see. If you're looking at what Scotty did under pressure last year, 1,300 yards in limited action, that 59% completion percentage was considering the fact that he had to start against, Texas Tech. And I mean, just really, really bad on the offensive line. I consider that actually a very big deal that he was able to, he was just a percentage. If he's at 60%, you're like, holy crap. Just that 1% makes such a big difference. And I think he took leaps. He took his lumps early and he took leaps late, is like how I like to say it. Scotty is one of those guys. Oops, sorry, guys. That has a real grit about him. And I think for sure will make a huge impact going forward. Sorry, I didn't mean to move my camera like that. So obviously this is going to be a fun battle to watch either way. But to say that somebody in the comments saying we won't be passing much, I totally disagree, actually. considering the guys we brought in, I don't necessarily think that's the case, especially when you look at the running backs that we have, and every one of them can receive, especially Boswell. Cam Cook's a very good receiver out of the backfield too. But Teron Francis is a guy that I think, especially if he turns into anything like he has the potential to be, is going to be a potential elite receiver. But obviously, Jaden Bray, this seems like it's got to finally be his year. And if he can finally stay healthy, it's not a talent issue with Jaden Bray, which thankfully it's not. I have a lot of faith in him. And then Prince Strawn, like the Boise version of him, 500 yards, that was a great version of him. And he's got all the talent in the world at 6'5". I love him too. I think West Virginia is going to have some players there. Epps, the receiver from Troy, comes in too. He's 6'1", and he is very much that jitterbug type that West Virginia likes to have. So I think there's more receiving options than people think. And when you consider the offensive linemen that West Virginia brought in, there are a couple guys that have great run grades. But when you look at it overall, Wes King never gave up a sack, right? You look at Devin Vass never gave up a sack over his final 7 games. Like all these dudes, Carson Cassidy gave up one pressure. All the guys they brought in were really good, have really good pass protection numbers for whatever reason. So, but yeah, it's definitely not a given either way. I think here's the thing. The main thing that gives me another look towards Scotty, like I said, is the system jump from year 1 to year 2. It's remember Geno Smith's junior year. He had a great junior year. And then he went to his senior year and went absolutely bonkers. There's a reason for that, right? He went from Jeff Mullins' offense to Dana Holgerson's offense in year 1 in his junior year, and then his senior year took totally off. I think the reason for that obviously is the year 1 to year 2 jump. It's a known factor in college football and pro football that the system from year 1 to year 2 is so much easier to digest. And I think that gives Scotty a huge leg up. So, and like I said, Scotty had multiple 50-plus yard rushing plays last year. So it's not like he can't run it. But also, I keep saying, this is just my opinion, right? It doesn't mean that Scotty's going to win the job at all. It has nothing to do with it. I just think that the system continuity, especially if the same offensive linemen play now, if they're different offensive linemen, maybe that definitely changes things up a little bit. But having a quarterback that knows the offenses matters to me, man, personally. So I think Scotty is only going to be better, but we'll see. Let's go to break. We'll come right back and talk a little bit about the room by room inspections here, because obviously the defensive line room and whatnot is very interesting to look at next. Talking about our friends at Mazda on this one. And look, when it comes to Mazda, you guys love Mazda vehicles, don't you? I know most people love Mazda. And this is Mazda's moving the game forward. For those who show there's more to the score than what's on screen, these remind us of what it really is like to raise the bar. It takes the extra effort and extra work off the court, dialing in every detail, giving it that extra fire, that grit, and I never quit. We put the same passion into every model. Highlights make the real, which is what it took to get there. It makes it count, right? There is more to Mazda because there's also more to you. So says us. All right, in segment 2, right before the game, I'm going to crack this dude. I seen somebody say they would bet money on Hawkins. Look, I'm not going to say it publicly, but just message me privately. There's more to that story with him. I think there's a very good chance that Scotty's the guy. That's just my opinion, though. We'll see. We'll see what plays out. Either way, I'm rooting for whoever it is. That's just how it works. Just like last year, I didn't feel like Nico should have been the guy. So a lot of people did. I didn't. That was probably the right choice for him not to be the guy. But either way, let's move on to the defensive stuff. For me, man, I think looking at first of all, let's look at what we have left with the Bandits. You lose, try to remember everybody. Obviously, Curtis Jones, you lose Marshawn Oxley, you lose Jamori Robinson, and you lose Braden Siders. You might lose, there might be another guy that I'm missing somewhere, but that is every conceivable defensive snap, right? That you lost. So on the Bandit side of things, that means there's no returning contributors, no returning snaps, and no returning continuity outside. But you are bringing in David Afogo, Harper Holloman, Noah Tischendorf on the freshman side of things, Jeremiah Johnson. Those guys are going to be interesting. They do have some experience, thankfully, but it's going to be interesting, man. You look at what last year was. Jamori Robinson obviously came in with as much hype as any player in history. Curtis Jones was a big-time storyline. Obviously he had the sack against Pitt, and then what he did as a running back was interesting. I thought he was improving, but I would have loved to have seen what he would have became over the course of his career, but either way, he's going to go show that somewhere else. And then Oxley kind of took a step back, right? We were expecting him to take a step forward, and he kind of took a step back from what he was in JUCO and stuff. So, there was a lot there. Sorry, guys, my eye's burning all of a sudden here. There was a lot there as far as potential. It just never played out. Robinson becomes one of the biggest busts in the history of the program. I don't think that's any stretch of the imagination. And obviously Braden Siders played really well at times, although he was outmatched in the run game and in a lot of cases was getting caved in on his side. So, it was just one of those things where I don't think we had a great mishmash of run stopping / pass rushing guys that could actually get to the quarterback. And it made a big difference. So, looking at it, I think Afogo brings some steadiness to it. Holloman brings some juice off the edge. I think on paper, this could be at least a functional room. We'll see. Obviously, with the defensive ends they brought in, that's where things could change a bit here. But, obviously, I don't think it's going to be worse. So, I don't know how it could be because they struggled to get the quarterback last year. And that's just what it is. If you're looking at the defensive line room, that's where it gets pretty interesting. You're looking at, obviously, Sonny Redwood, Elijah Simmons, Eddie Kelly Jr. Let me try to use my sleeve here. Good Lord. What have I done? I put lotion on my hands earlier. Maybe that's in my eye. Eddie Kelly Jr., Devin Grant, who played well at times, Hammond Russell, Eddie Vesterinen. A lot of lost here. I mean, just thousands of snaps, right? So I think that, once again, this is another room that you look at and say, how do you replace it all? I mean, how do you replace it all? Well, luckily you have some returning guys. You've got Nate Gabriel, Corey McIntyre, who finally got to play last year after 2 straight off seasons getting injured, where we thought he was going to be a guy. He turned out to be pretty good. I think he can make a big jump this year. Nate Gabriel obviously is ready to make he's been playing since he was a freshman. Wilnerson, Telemac, Taylor Brown, Brandon Caesar obviously also have a great chance to make a difference. And why wouldn't they? Because I think that these are also guys that you would love to have. I'll say this too, when you're looking at what else is coming in, Will LeBlanc, Ezekiel Durham Campbell, Toby Hostrip, uh, what else is coming in? Oh yeah, the JUCO guys. You got Jalen Thomas, KJ Henson, Darius Wiley, and all that. And I think you got the freshman Cam Mallory and Dermack. It's not even close to me. This room absolutely blows away last year's room to me. Blows it away. There's a couple guys from last year's room I would love to have back. Eddie Kelly Jr. was a good, a solid run stopping defensive end. Devin Grant was pretty good pass rusher at times. And obviously, Eddie Vestorinen was good in the middle, but not elite. None of these players were elite. But I mean, those are the three guys you would like to have back. But I mean, you consider what you've got returning, plus what's coming in with Toby Hostrip. Like, obviously, he's an elite, high ceiling guy that has to do it. Ezekiel Durham Campbell he just put some new tape out, by the way, on his Instagram. He messaged me wanted me to tell you guys that. I forgot to tell you. Ezekiel Durham Campbell messaged me like 2 or 3 days ago and said, hey, I got some new highlights on my Instagram. So if you get a chance to go check them out, go check them out. They're pretty good. Will LeBlanc's a wild card. Obviously, he was dominant at D2. Would love to see what he's going to be next. I mean, he could totally be an Eddie B kind of guy, except he's a little more athletic. Ezekiel Durham Campbell he's got it all as far as the size, the explosion off the edge. I think he's capable of, I mean, if you look at Ezekiel Durham Campbell and you place him side by side with Jamori Robinson, they look very similar. And, I know you might say that's a bad thing, but I'm talking about in size and explosion and all that. I don't know what happened to Robinson's explosion. I have no idea why he didn't get to the quarterback at all last year. I just think he was out of shape and gave up and didn't care or something, because if you go look at his UTSA tape, it's totally night and day. I don't know what happened. It'll be a mystery. And, sometimes these guys get paid. They get the money. And they just that they've made it. They rest on their laurels. One thing my dad always told me, and it was very, very, because my dad had a lot of money. I don't know if I've said this before publicly, but my dad didn't get it easily. He lost his arm for it in an accident that wasn't his fault. But something my dad always told me was, people aren't always mature enough to handle wealth. People talk about maturity and things. Sometimes it's, am I mature enough to have this good thing, even though it's a lot of money? Am I mature enough to have this good car, this great, this fast car, or am I mature enough to have all this money? And I think what happens is when, these transfers come in and they get some money up front, I'm sure, I don't know this to be fact, but I'm assuming you're able to go out and buy a car, maybe do some jewelry and, have spending money and all these things, especially if you're having a, 7-figure deal or close to it. That's life-changing, and it would be easy to think you could just get by on your raw talent and lose your edge. And maybe that's what happened. Total speculation, but what else could it be? And I mean, obviously you missed on the evaluation. Jalen Thomas, I've mentioned him a few times now. KJ Henson as well, and Darius Wiley too. All three of those guys are going to play a lot. And a matter of fact, I think Jalen Thomas has a chance to be the next great nose at West Virginia. It's got to translate up to the Power 4 level. But if you watch him at JUCO, he plays right over top of the center, and he engages with centers, and he just don't move, right? That's what he does well. He breaks through double teams quite often, and you would just hope that he can be that Lee Hunter type. Now, nobody's going to be Lee Hunter from Texas Tech last year. But if you can get a guy that can be 75% of that, You're talking about a big time deal for the middle of your defense. I think Jalen Thomas has a chance to be that. So we'll see if he will, see if he is. Um, Obviously, Darius Wiley, 6'7", 255. He can rush off the edge a bit. And I mentioned KJ Henson is he's got. I'm not saying that he's Dante Stills, but that's how he moves, right? That's like as a defensive lineman, he's not the kind of guy that's like, stout and engages with blockers and stacks and sheds necessarily. Like he's dipping, he's dodging, he's swimming. He's beating guys with speed. And he's 6'4" ish, 250 or so. Another guy that's, a defensive tackle. He might be a bit bigger, but that I can see, he's very similar to Dante Stills. In that he's just a great athlete. So I like him a lot too. And I think he can definitely make an impact. On the freshman side, Cam Mallory, guys, you won't believe how many national analysts I've heard talk about him. And whenever Matt Sig committed to West Virginia, he flipped right on national television on the 247 sports show. They were talking about him, but then they were like, well, who else in the class do you like for West Virginia? Cam Mallory is the guy they brought up. Whenever I went and spoke to our national recruiting guy at Locked On, who is a national guy, he said, man, he's like looking at our list. He's like, oh yeah, I've seen that guy, Cam Mallory, because he's from the South. He's from Alabama. And he's just an immense talent. If you guys get a chance to go check him out, he's another one on the defensive line. I think he can make an impact year one. He's got a play on his highlights where I don't know what happened. They tried to chop block him, and he Superman dives. Literally, he's literally horizontal. He Superman dives over top of this dude and makes the tackle over top of him. He probably jumps 6 feet. And he's probably 290, 295. He's just an incredible athlete. Watch out for Cam Mallory. It's a guy that I think can make a big difference on the D-line. There are a lot of people that like him. Yender Max, maybe a year and a half away, but he's another guy that West Virginia stole here at the very end. They really did. But yeah, so if you can get Hostrup and Ezekiel Durham Campbell to play at a high level, you're talking about in one of the best defensive lines we've had in years. But it's going to be, you're going to have to hit on a couple guys for it to happen. But yeah, so let's go to break one more time. We'll come back and put a bow on this one. And we're talking about our friends at TurboTax here. And why wouldn't we? We love taxes. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. And this year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever just to hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can just meet with the local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app right there. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. And if a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, just file by February 28th. Take your taxes off your plate and get back to your life. You can visit turbotax.com/local to book your appointment today. All right, we back. So we got about 15 minutes before game tips off. Obviously a couple thoughts on the game. This is one of those games, man, where it's like kind of a little bit of a trap game for West Virginia. I don't know, man. I saw John Kurtz did a video earlier yesterday that said K-State has a Jerome Tang problem. I know things aren't going well for them, right? They're 10-10. They're 1-6 in the Big 12. They've got injuries dinging them up in the depth side of things. Obviously they just lost big to Kansas, but they did get a win over Utah. PJ Haggerty was supposed to be their everything, and he is. He also leads them in rebounds and assists. So he's literally everything. David Castillo, Nate Johnson are the secondary threats for them, but they're really inconsistent, man, with the key shooters they have out and injured. So that's the problem with them right now is they're injured and all that. They still score at quite a bit, 84 points per game, but West Virginia is going to probably try to slow it down, slow the tempo, and then get that defensive grind. You want to know something crazy? West Virginia's, I looked earlier, per I think it was per DraftKings. I looked earlier, but West Virginia is slowing the tempo to 66.6 possessions right now. So it's like, man, can we just change that number, please, today, if you don't mind? Not a big fan of that being the number for that. Craziness, man. Kansas State's defense is really bad. We should have a chance to really get off tonight. We're also undefeated at home. So, West Virginia should win and get to that 17-13 overall versus K-State. But K-State's taken the last 3 meetings versus us. So I think the storylines are this. Can Kansas State slow West Virginia's defense down? Most of the time you think of it, can they slow an offense down? But West Virginia plays a grinded style, pack the paint, contest the 3, control the pace, right? So I think, K-State's got this up-tempo scoring style, and it only works if they hit early baskets and avoid turnovers. So West Virginia is going to try to obviously do the opposite of that. They're going to try to make them shoot late in the clock, and they're going to try to turn them over and speed them up. So, obviously shooting a good shot early in the clock is different than being sped up and shooting a bad shot. West Virginia's depth and role players should play a big difference in this game because they're hurt. So if we can get production from Trey, Brennan, and Moore, obviously Honor Huff too, but they mitigate Haggerty's onslaught because he's coming. I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to really pay attention to, because we had seen for several straight games until I think Arizona, who just blitzed us. Jasper Floyd had held the opposing guard to under their average. See if Jasper gets any time on Haggerty tonight. And obviously K-State's looking for a big shot and confidence here. So their only Big 12 win came versus Utah. That's really bad. Maybe the only team worse than them. So inconsistency is a theme here. If they can break West Virginia's home streak, that could turn their season a little bit for them. West Virginia is favored by 7.5. The over-under is 146.5 per FanDuel. So, I obviously like West Virginia to win this game tonight. I think West Virginia wins it by – I'm going to say West Virginia wins this game by 16, 76-60. I really think Kansas State is just really struggling right now. We can't have one of those performances where we can't make anything. If that happens, then we could be in big trouble because Haggerty is lightning in a bottle, right? So, obviously if we can hold them, if we can keep this game into the 50s and 60s, it favors us. But, at the same time, I would like for our offense to do a couple things. So, good luck to the Mountaineers tonight. Let's go. Let's see if we can keep marching towards the tournament. In a year one scenario, that's all we're really asking for, guys, which would be immense. So let's see if we can get it done. I think this team is tournament capable, but you're going to have to win these layups. Tonight should be a layup for you. So let's see what happens. And I will be back to do the post game afterwards. Maybe tomorrow, depends on how late it is, but for the most part, I'll probably be here right after the game. I will put a link up. You guys will be able to see probably right as the game goes. It ends, unless it's close right down to the last second. If it's close right down to the last second, most of the time I can't get on my computer and do that because I'm watching it. But I'll have a link up right at towards the end of the game, most likely, if we're going to be going live tonight. So be watching for that. And I'll see you guys then or tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day. Let's go Mountaineers.